first question, were these simulations rendered with Blender? Yeah, they were, because Blender's node editor gives you a ton of control over how your volumetrics look, but were these simulated in Blender? No, not a fucking chance. Why? Because Mantaflow is slow, it's clunky, and it's really slow. And this becomes apparent when you use something like Embergen, which has real-time simulations calculated on the GPU. Real-time, as in, this is Mantaflow, this is Embergen, Mantaflow, Embergen, Mantaflow, Embergen. Yeah, OpenVDB, it's a file format for storing three-dimensional volumetric data, and the nice thing about it is you can store multiple channels of information, meaning any volumetric simulation you can make can be stored in this format, which is useful because, why is it useful? Oh, that's right, Blender 2.83 just added OpenVDB support. How interesting. It almost looks like we can simulate in a different, better program, export this volumetric as a VDB sequence, and then render back in Blender, which is where we want to be working in the first place. And once we get back in Blender, we can render this however we want, move and duplicate this in 3D space, and most importantly, we can... So again, our story is all about simulating in a different program and using OpenVDB as the ship, the vessel, the thing that gets us from one side to another that lets us render in Blender and use all the simulation data in Blender. But the question remains, how do we export this VDB information in the first place? Well, assuming that you're using Embergen, you're going to have some kind of simulation. It's not particularly meaningful what simulation that is. You can even use one of the presets to get a whole bunch of different kinds of effects without doing a lot of work. But anyways, what you're going to do is add in an export VDB node, which is going to let you choose the frame range of what it is you want to export. You also need to set a file directory, a path for where it is you want to export this stuff. And finally, you can choose what channels it is that you want to export, what kind of information, but the stuff that's there by default is already fine. We don't need all that extra stuff, although some of it is pretty fancy. You then hit the export button, and guess what? You now have a VDB sequence that is ready to use for Blender. Yeah, so the way editing works is sometimes your music isn't long enough because you have too much footage, so I guess more music. Final step, importing our VDB files. It's really as easy as adding in an import VDB object, and we want this to be a sequence so that we have all the VDB files playing back to back to back. Just reposition this thing so it's simulating wherever it is that you want it, and again, this is something you can duplicate, move, whatever you want to do. For the material, we'll use the volumetric BSDF where we can control the density to control the density of the smoke. That's basically what it does. We can also control the color of the smoke and some obvious stuff, but for the temperature, you want to use the flames attribute, which is one of the things that we exported in our VDB file, and if we make the black body intensity 1, then we can actually do a temperature multiplier, which will make this look like very realistic fire that we don't need to use a gradient for. It's pretty easy to import this stuff in. So, you made it to the end of the tutorial, but it is a sponsored tutorial, and thank you to our sponsor, Surfshark VPN. But you might be thinking, what is a VPN? It's a virtual private network, and the point is, you are using the internet, and a lot of your data is exposed to either people who want to use it maliciously, maybe people want to use it for targeted advertising, whatever. The point of a VPN is it's in some sense a filter that prevents this, but the reason to have a VPN isn't only about the privacy, there's other benefits that you can get. For example, if you're traveling, you're going to be using less mobile roaming data. It also makes you less susceptible to targeted advertising. What features does Surfshark VPN have? Well, first of all, it has hack lock ID protection, which means they will notify you if your emails leak, your passwords leak. Additionally, Smart DNS, which will let you effectively use the Surfshark VPN on all your devices. This includes consoles, phones, whatever else. You can use as many devices as you want with one subscription, so this is a nice thing to have. And in general, you have compatibility with pretty much whatever you can be using. So it works with Windows, it works with Mac, it works with Linux. You have a computer, it's going to work, and other devices, it's going to work. If you use my link in the description, you're going to get 85% off, and additionally, you're going to get 3 free months of Surfshark VPN, so hop on that if that is something you want.